Carl Edon was born into a completely ordinary English family in 1981 in Yorkshire. His parents, Margaret and Robert Edon, were both teachers who raised their son in a peaceful, intellectual environment. Nothing suggested that this blonde-haired, blue-eyed little boy would soon be struggling with memories from another era, another nation, and a completely different life. From the age of 2, Carl began showing unusual behavior. While his peers played with toy cars and teddy bears, he obsessively drew airplanes. But not just any airplanes, precisely executed fighter aircraft, which he often decorated with swastikas on the wings. His parents initially regarded these as harmless children's drawings, but as Carl grew older, his drawings became increasingly detailed and accurate. By the age of 3, he was drawing aircraft that even an adult couldn't have created with such precision, recalled Margaret Edon. He knew every detail of the machines, the shape of the wings, the placement of the engine, even the structure of the cockpit. We thought he had some special talent for engineering drawing. The real turning point came when Carl turned 4. One day, while watching a BBC World War II documentary, the little boy suddenly stood up from his armchair and, pointing to a German Messerschmitt fighter, shouted, "That was mine! That was my airplane!" His parents listened in shock as Carl began explaining the machine's operation in detail, using technical terms that a 4-year-old child couldn't possibly have known. He talked about the plane's speed, the type of armament. He even knew what kind of fuel it used, Robert Edon recounted. He said things that we, as adults, didn't know, and all of it as if they were personal memories. Carl increasingly spoke of his previous life, in which he had lived in Germany under the name Hans Richter. According to his account, he was born in Munich in 1902 and had wanted to fly since childhood. He described his family: his father, who was a mechanical engineer, and his mother, who was a piano teacher at a local music school. According to Hans, his father worked at the Messerschmitt factory, Margaret Edon noted in her diary. That's why he was fascinated by airplanes from an early age. He said his daddy often took him to the factory, and that's where he learned about aircraft construction. Most shocking was that Carl accurately described Hans's wartime experiences. He spoke of how he volunteered for the Luftwaffe at 18, how he went through training, and how he received his first mission. He recounted the experience of aerial combat in such detail that his parents increasingly wondered whether this could be mere fantasy. Hans said his favorite airplane was a Messerschmitt Bf-109, Robert Edon remembered. He described what it felt like to fly it, how the engine sounded, and even told us what the cockpit smelled like. These were details that a small child couldn't have invented. Carl often played as if he were flying. He stretched out his arms, imitated engine sounds, and demonstrated maneuvers that were actual elements of aerial combat. His parents noticed that in these moments, Carl's personality completely changed. He became more serious, more adult-like, and mixed German words into his speech, though he had never learned German. Sometimes it looked as if the soul of an experienced pilot had moved into our little boy's body, Margaret Edon wrote. He made such movements, used such expressions. How could a 4-year-old child have known these? The situation became truly alarming when Carl began talking about nightmares. In these dreams, Hans Richter relived his last mission over and over. He described how his plane was shot down in 1944 during an attack on Allied bombers. Hans said an American P-51 Mustang shot him down, Carl told regression therapist Dr. Sarah Mitchell when he was 6 years old. I saw the bullets pierce my wing, and I felt the plane lose control. I knew I was going to die. Dr. Mitchell, who had initially accepted Carl's case only out of curiosity, soon realized she was facing an extraordinary phenomenon. The little boy described the aerial battle with such precision that the therapist decided to investigate the details more thoroughly. Carl's description completely matched what we know from wartime documents about contemporary aerial battles, Dr. Mitchell wrote in her journal. He knew the different aircraft types, knew their speeds, their maneuvers, even the radio protocols. How could a 6-year-old child have known such details? The therapist contacted the German Federal Archives and researchers specializing in Luftwaffe history. The results were surprising. Although many documents were destroyed during the war, they managed to find traces of a pilot named Hans Richter, who had indeed served in the described period and location. In the Luftwaffe archives, we found an officer named Hans Richter, who died a hero's death in aerial combat on October 10, 1944, wrote Dr. Klaus Weber, a researcher at the Munich Institute of Military History. The circumstances match what the little boy described. Dr. Mitchell decided to perform deeper hypnotic regression with Carl. With his parents' consent and several experts present, she continued the investigation. The results were even more astounding than what she had previously experienced. Join those who believe that consciousness transcends the boundaries of death. Subscribe to our channel to be the first to learn about the latest reincarnation research and mysteries of the spiritual world. Under hypnosis, Carl completely switched to Hans's personality. His voice became deeper, his posture more military, and he began speaking German fluently. Dr. Mitchell had to call in an interpreter to understand what the little boy was saying. "Es ist so kalt hier oben," whispered Carl Hans under hypnosis. "It's so cold up here. The engine is smoking, and I know I won't survive this day." According to the interpreter, Carl spoke in a Bavarian dialect characteristic of the 1930s and 1940s. Hans told his life story in detail under hypnosis. He spoke of his Munich childhood, how he was fascinated by the aircraft being built at the Messerschmitt factory. He described his Luftwaffe training, his first solo flight, and the feeling when he first shot down an enemy aircraft. Hans said his first victory was a Soviet Yakovlev fighter in 1943, Dr. Mitchell recorded. He described the battle in detail, the type of aircraft, even the face of the Soviet pilot he saw before he crashed. Most moving was when Hans recounted his own death. He described how he set out on his last mission, to attack an American bomber formation. He spoke of the feeling when he saw the P-51 Mustangs in the distance and knew he was facing superior numbers. "I saw them coming from the direction of the sun," said Carl in Hans's voice. "I knew it was a trap, but there was nowhere to escape. On the radio, I heard my comrades' shouts as they were shot down one by one." Hans described in detail how his aircraft was hit, how he tried to bail out of the burning plane but ultimately failed. He fought for his life until the last moment, but the plane was too low for him to jump out. Hans's description of his death was so realistic that all of us who were there cried, Dr. Mitchell wrote. Such pain was reflected on Carl's face, such desperation, that it was impossible to believe a 6-year-old child was pretending. Dr. Mitchell continued researching Hans Richter's life. She managed to make contact with descendants of the Richter family, who confirmed Hans's existence. A great-niece, Ingrid Richter, said that Hans had indeed been a member of their family and had indeed been a pilot during the war. "Hans was my great-grandfather's younger brother," Ingrid Richter recounted. "The family always talked about him as a talented young man who died too early. What this little boy says corresponds to what we know about Hans." The most convincing evidence, however, was an old family photograph that Ingrid showed to Dr. Mitchell. In the picture, Hans Richter stood in front of his airplane, and when Carl saw the photo, he immediately recognized it. "That's me," Carl exclaimed. That was my plane, and this is the airfield where I served." The little boy also mentioned details about the photograph that even family members didn't know, but which were later verified. News of the case soon reached media attention. Dr. Ian Stevenson, the then leading reincarnation researcher, also showed interest in Carl's case. According to Stevenson, this case was particularly interesting because the child came from a culture that was hostile to the people whose member he remembered being in his previous life. In Carl's case, an English little boy remembers the life of a German Nazi pilot, Dr. Stevenson wrote. This is particularly noteworthy because the memory of World War II is still vivid among the British. Why would a child raised in an average English family choose Hans Richter's life if this were just fantasy? Skeptics naturally sought other explanations. Dr. Michael Shermer, one of the leading representatives of skepticism, argued that Carl's case was nothing more than extremely advanced cryptomnesia, the recall of memories that the child had unconsciously acquired from various sources. Nowadays, a lot of information is available about World War II, Dr. Shermer wrote. It's possible that Carl combined information from various documentaries, books, or the internet into a coherent story, which he then experienced as his own memory. However, several facts challenge this explanation. Carl knew details about Hans's life that were not publicly available. He knew, for example, what perfume Hans used, what his favorite food was, and even what songs he sang while flying. These are such intimate details that don't appear in any official documents, Dr. Weber noted. Even if Carl had read through every available source about Hans, he couldn't have obtained this information. As Carl developed, Hans's memories gradually faded into the background. As he increasingly integrated into English culture and the school environment, he spoke less and less frequently about his previous life. After age 10, he only occasionally mentioned Hans, more as an interesting memory rather than an active personality. "I learned to live with Hans's memories," Carl said in an interview at 15. "It no longer bothered me that I was a German pilot in another life. I rather learned from it." Dr. Mitchell continued following Carl into adulthood. The young man developed normally, showed nothing abnormal, and successfully completed his studies. Interestingly, however, he became an engineer and still works in the aviation industry today. "I always knew that flying would be my passion," Carl said at 30. "Maybe this is Hans's legacy, or maybe it's my natural inclination. I'll never know for sure." Over the years, several researchers have examined Carl's case. Dr. Jim Tucker, who continued Dr. Stevenson's work at the University of Virginia, ranked Carl's case among the most convincing reincarnation cases. "Carl's case is extraordinary in several respects," Dr. Tucker wrote. "Not only because of the accuracy of the details, but because it's cross-cultural. An English child remembers a German life, which argues against the cultural conditioning theory." Modern neurology also opens new perspectives for examining Carl's case. Dr. Mario Beauregard, a neurologist at the University of Montreal, believes that cases like Carl's suggest that consciousness is not limited to the brain. If consciousness were only a product of the brain, how could a German pilot's memories be in an English little boy's brain? Dr. Beauregard asked. Carl's case suggests that consciousness can transcend the boundaries of the physical body. Philosophically, Carl's case raises profound questions about the nature of identity. If Carl is indeed Hans Richter's reincarnation, what does this mean for moral responsibility? Is Carl responsible for Hans's wartime actions? This is one of the most complicated questions of reincarnation cases, philosopher Dr. Robert Thurman wrote. According to Buddhist tradition, karma can be carried from one life to another. But according to Western legal thinking, each person is only responsible for their own actions. Carl himself struggled with this question. As a child, he often felt bad when Hans's wartime memories surfaced. By adulthood, however, he learned to separate the two identities. "Hans was Hans, and I am Carl," he said in an interview. "I'm not responsible for what he did, but I can learn from it. Memories of the past can help me be a better person in the present." Dr. Mitchell, who followed Carl's development for years, saw that the case had a positive impact on the boy's life. Although initially it was traumatic to struggle with Hans's memories, Carl eventually became a richer personality through it. Carl learned to integrate Hans's memory into his own personality, Dr. Mitchell wrote. He didn't deny it, but he didn't completely identify with it either. This was a mature, balanced approach. The impact of the case extended beyond Carl's personal experience. It inspired other researchers to study childhood reincarnation memories more thoroughly. Today, hundreds of similar cases have been documented worldwide. Carl's case opened the way for examining other cross-cultural reincarnation cases, Dr. Stevenson wrote. It showed that these phenomena are not limited to certain cultures or religions. Modern quantum physics also offers new explanations for cases like Carl's. According to Dr. Stuart Hameroff, quantum mechanics may make it possible for information to survive the death of the physical body and manifest in another body. According to quantum consciousness theory, consciousness is not a location-bound phenomenon, Dr. Hameroff explained. It's possible that Hans's consciousness survived in some form and was activated in Carl's brain. Carl's story continues today. At 44, he still works in the aviation industry and occasionally still feels Hans's presence. But this no longer bothers him. He rather sees it as an internal advisor who helps him with difficult decisions. Sometimes, when I'm struggling with a complex engineering problem, it's as if Hans is whispering in my ear, Carl said in a recent interview. It's as if I have the experience of two people within me, which helps me find more creative solutions. Carl's case also highlights how important family support is in processing such extraordinary experiences. Margaret and Robert Edon never rejected their son's memories, but tried to understand and support him. "We never told Carl that what he was saying wasn't true," Margaret Edon recalled. "Instead, we tried to help him process these experiences. This was our best decision." Subscribe to our channel and join those who are open to the mysteries of consciousness. Don't miss the latest reincarnation research and spiritual discoveries. The long-term effects of the case include that Carl inspired other families struggling with children having similar experiences. Dozens of similar cases have since been brought to Dr. Mitchell's clinic, and all learned from Carl's experiences. Carl's case showed that these experiences are not psychological disorders, but may be genuine reincarnation memories, Dr. Mitchell wrote. This helped other families not to deprive their children of these experiences. The scientific community is still divided about Carl's case. While some see it as clear evidence for reincarnation, others remain skeptical. But even skeptics acknowledge that the case is extraordinary and requires explanation. Even if we don't accept reincarnation as an explanation, Carl's case raises important questions about the nature of consciousness, Dr. Susan Blackmore wrote. These cases help us better understand how the human mind works. Carl himself rarely speaks publicly about Hans's memories today. He rather focuses on living a normal family life with his wife and 2 children. But when he does speak, he always emphasizes that the experience positively changed his life. "Hans's memories taught me that life is a fragile gift," Carl said. "Every day should be lived as if it were the last, because we never know when our current life might end." The philosophical lessons of the case extend beyond the question of reincarnation. Carl's story speaks of how to integrate past traumas, how to learn from previous experiences, and how to find peace with the inexplicable. Carl's case shows that we don't have to understand everything to accept it, wrote Dr. Brian Weiss, another pioneer of regression therapy. Sometimes wisdom lies in learning to live with mysteries. Modern technology opens new possibilities for further examination of Carl's case. With the development of brain imaging techniques, perhaps one day we will see what happens in Carl's brain when Hans's memories surface. Future research may be able to find objective evidence for the existence of such memories, Dr. Tucker wrote. Carl's case is pioneer work in this direction. Today, more than 30 years after the first memories, Carl Edon's story continues to fascinate those who are open to the mysteries of consciousness. The case points out that human experience can be much richer and more complex than traditional science assumes. Carl himself puts it this way: "I can't explain with certainty what happened to me, but I know I was part of an extraordinary experience that changed my outlook on life. If it was reincarnation, then I'm grateful for it. If not, I still learned from it. And ultimately, that's what matters most." The legacy of the case lies in pointing out that reality is much more complex than we think. Carl's story reminds us that we must remain open to new possibilities, even when they challenge our traditional worldview. The story of Hans Richter and Carl Edon, whether it be reincarnation or another phenomenon, teaches that the boundaries of consciousness may extend far beyond what we know about it today. And this is perhaps one of the most exciting questions humanity faces. Is there really life after death? And if so, in what form?